a new cable, undersea cable, just started, which enabled me to broadcast direct down this telephone line describing this hijacking. But I could see what was going on NKV, the Japanese television, and I could ring them up. Of course, I couldn't tell what they were saying because it was in Japanese, but I could ring up Japan Airlines people who told me in English what was going on. And this hijacking was very elaborate. The men wielding the swords were in complete control, and they kept making this plane take off and land somewhere else. And finally, they took it from Japan to Korea, and the BBC got very excited and said to me, "Follow that plane." And so, but I didn't follow that plane. I stayed in my bedroom, although the plane kept being bounced up and down and taken to first South Korea and North Korea. The BBC were so convinced I was following it, they even bylined some of my reports as coming from North Korea, although I was still safe in my bedroom in Tokyo. And from there, as soon as it was over, I managed to get on another plane, fly back to New York, and joined up with Margaret in a rather crummy hotel, because there we were, Margaret was with me unofficially, and we were having to, both of us live on my BBC daily allowance. Well, so then I had 5 days before launch to start coverage from New York, and I went to the Hayden Planetarium for a day to interview an astronomer, a real boffin astronomer, who'd invented a moon watch, enabling moon dwellers, and we expected there'd be a lot of them then, to tell the time on the moon, which of course, you know, has the day and the night on the moon are 30 days long. 30 days of daylight, 30 days of nighttime. And this chap said, oh, well, he'd invented this, he'd invented this watch. Steve, come and sort this out for me. He'd invented this watch. So I said to him, okay, the astronauts are due to land on the moon on April 16 at 3:55 a.m. Now, what time is that going to be on the moon? Oh, well, he said, I'm not quite sure, not confident about it myself yet, but he said, I'm sure the astronauts will have no trouble. He said, when they land on the moon, the time by their lunar watches will be 45 centiliters past 22 lunars in the 9th lune of the 585th lunation. So that was how they were going to read the time on the moon, he thought. But we've never heard of the watch since. Well, when we arrived at the Cape, NASA's troubles were increasing. Jim Lovell, he's the commander on the left there, he was fighting a rearguard action because Ken Mattingly, the man in the middle, was to be the command module pilot, and his job was going to be to stay in orbit around the moon for 2 days, while the other two landed on the surface and then came back, and it was Ken Mattingly's job to rescue them and bring them back to Earth. Ken Mattingly had been exposed to the measles, and he'd never had it. And the NASA doctor said, oh my goodness, we can't possibly allow Ken Mattingly to fly. He's going to be circling the moon on his own for 2 days while the others are on the surface. And what's going to happen if he develops the measles? So Jim Lovell said, oh, I want the whole flight postponed for a month. But NASA said, not likely. They said, we've got all the recovery forces in position. In those days, very elaborate, they had 4,300 American servicemen around the world, 47 aircraft positioned in various places, and 5 ships, including a huge aircraft carrier, positioned in the Pacific Ocean. And they said, if we postpone this mission, it's going to cost us an extra $700,000. So Ken Mattingly can't fly, you'll have to have the backup pilot. And he was, so then Ken Mattingly was switched to this chap in the middle now, John Swigert, that's right. He weighed 50 pounds more, so they were a bit worried about all this extra weight. But there they are, sitting in front of the, that's the Apollo command module on the right here. That's this bit. This is where the astronauts live, just in that bit. And there they are, looking at the lunar module, the part they expected to land on the moon. Fred Hayes on the left and Jim Lovell on the right. They expected to go down and land on the moon in that, spend 3 days there and come back again. Little did they know that they'd, instead of using that thing to land on the moon, they'd got to use it as a lifeboat to tow them home when it blew up. So we did various interviews with them. And there's Lovell's family, that one. And this is Jim Lovell's family, the commander. He had a lovely family. As I say, we interviewed Jim, and he said, oh no, he wasn't worried about about Apollo 13. And so we interviewed his wife, Marilyn Monroe. She was very popular. We always enjoyed teasing her. And Jim Lovell had been round the moon on Apollo 10, Apollo 8, the first ever person to make a circuit of the moon without actually landing. And he'd been looking down, they were all allowed to name craters after people. And Jim Lovell saw 2 twin peaks, and he named them Mount Marilyn. And we all teased his wife Marilyn Lovell that he hadn't really been thinking about her. He was thinking about Marilyn Monroe, who was all the rage at that time. Anyway, she assured us she wasn't superstitious either, but she did say she was very relieved because Jim had said this was going to be his last flight. He'd been up 4 times, which was a record for astronauts in those days. And so you may ask, why on earth should they launch at 13 hours? Why was that so important? Well, it's fairly simple, really, because you have to, when you plan a launch, you've got to launch your spacecraft at the right speed, and that to leave the Earth, you've got to reach 24,000 miles an hour, and then you've got to arrive at the moon